Hey there Trekkies, my name's Michael aka the TrekLad, welcome back to the channel. I hope you're doing well. I've just finished reading Dr. Una McCormick's autobiography of Captain Kathryn Janeway, and I have some thoughts about it. But before I get into today's video, please like this video and subscribe to the channel for weekly Star Trek videos and live streams. You can also support the channel and unlock exclusive perks such as early access to new videos by becoming a fan on Patreon. Head on over to patreon.com/TrekLad to get started today. This is actually the first fictional book that I've actually sat down and read in like almost 15 years. Me and books, we don't have a close relationship. Following many a chat on my podcast networking on Nimbus Free, go check it out, links in the description below, I decided it was finally time that I ended my illiterate phase and jumped back into the Star Trek lit universe. Now this doesn't mean that I've not read anything, I actually am always reading, it's just usually technical manuals. No, not that one. Or non-fiction stuff like autobiographies. I actually have over 200 Star Trek and general sci-fi books, it's just none of them have ever really called out to me to be read. So I thought easing myself back into the reading world via a reading format that I'm already familiar just kind of made sense to me. Turns out, it was a pretty great decision. Chronicling the life of one of Starfleet's great female captains, the autobiography of Kathryn Janeway fleshes out our hero like never before, with insight into her upbringing from the farms of Bloomington, Indiana, relationships with family, the challenges of adolescence, life at the academy, and her early years in Starfleet, all before covering the events seen in Voyager and what we didn't see following the ship's return home. Choosing this as my first book back in the Trek lit universe was kind of confirmed as a really great decision within the first few pages. I mean, like the first few lines, if I'm being completely honest. It was a terrific read. It wasn't perfect, and I'll cover some of that in a bit, but it's definitely a book that had me wanting to explore more in this universe, particularly anything written by Dr. McCormick. Sometimes there's a fear that knowing too much of a character that you love might rob them of some of that intrigue that draws you to them in the first place, but that wasn't the case here. Sure, the book fills in a lot of the gaps, not only of Janeway's youth and later career, but things that we didn't see during Voyager's often difficult 7-year trip through the Delta Quadrant. One of those being considerable attention given to her relationship with Mark, something that the book enhances considerably. We already know that this was a tender relationship, but McCormick adds layers, turning a minor on-screen relationship into an almost Shakespearean tragedy. I frequently found myself emotionally invested in these moments, feeling almost unsure if I was actually allowed to know such intimate details in the captain's personal life. Already knowing the relationship was doomed to fail, having watched the show, McCormick still found ways to pile on the feels with an emotional reunion that, for me anyway, bore a very strong resemblance to the moment Tom Hanks reunited with Helen Hunt at the end of Castaway. I love the way McCormick weaves the story around and enhances established Trek lore, with the Cardassian War and the Bajoran refugee crisis acting as very thinly veiled allegory for some very real-world issues. Their inclusion also helped maintain a sense of vast in-universe scope, which is something that I imagine Trek books are probably pretty good at. There was even a very brief passage that could be used to explain Starfleet's more cynical attitudes that we saw in Picard's first season, and I really appreciated that. The book also effortlessly judges a number of small threads that neatly orbit the main narrative. Of course, this is Janeway's story, but McCormick provides plenty of material to service the other members of Voyager as well, particularly Tom Paris and his turbulent relationship with his father. Even characters that I wasn't expecting to get much of a mention, Voyager's original first officer, chief medical officer, and helmsman, all got fleshed out in a way that will have me appreciating their limited on-screen time more than ever before. One of my favourite things, however, and this might sound a bit silly as I'm probably not using the right terminology, I could look it up but I'm not going to, is how McCormick's prose perfectly matches Kate Mulgrew's on-screen portrayal. I know the audiobook was read by Mulgrew herself, but I didn't need it. The words on the page already read perfectly in her style, so much so that I was able to effortlessly imagine that she was just reading it out to me anyway. That has to be some sort of elite skill, right? Now, as I mentioned earlier, there were some things here that I didn't entirely dig. The first, and this is probably a tad unavoidable, was my lack of interest in the book's middle passage, the bits that chronicled what we actually saw on screen. Barring a number of interesting tidbits that tied neatly into Janeway's youth, there wasn't really much here to take away. Of course, given that it's such a large part of her life, this all had to be included. I just found myself much more engaged with Janeway's early life and life post-Voyager that bookended the story. There are also a couple of key moments that were very interestingly omitted from the story. One particular moment being Janeway's willing assimilation by the Borg in Unimatrix Zero. Now, I know she wasn't actually assimilated into the collective, but surely the events would have been worth at least a couple of paragraphs, given how traumatic we know the assimilation process is. This is her autobiography. She can essentially choose what she writes about, and I don't know, maybe this isn't public knowledge. I don't know, maybe. That's headcanon. Finally, and this might be a really contentious point, but I wasn't sure how to feel about the revelation of Amelia as Janeway's actual daughter. On one hand, I absolutely loved how a seemingly insignificant anecdote about freezing some eggs would pay off so nicely, but using those eggs without the captain's permission or knowledge feels to me like something that someone might not be entirely comfortable with. Now, clearly, Kathryn is absolutely thrilled with the idea of having a daughter to continue the fine Janeway legacy, so it's not a problem. It's just something that got me thinking. As all good Star Trek should do, right? Overall, this was a book. A tremendously entertaining read that made me love this amazing character even more than I already did, and a book that should also result in an enhanced experience when I next decide to rewatch Voyager. Bravo, Dr. Una. I'm giving the autobiography of Captain Kathryn Janeway an A. I know there are autobiographies out there for Captains Picard and Kirk already out there. I think I own them both already. Which one should I read next? Have you given Janeway's autobiography a read? If you have, let me know what you thought in the comments below, and let me know if there are any other Star Trek books that I should spend some time with. Until the next one, stay happy, stay safe, and live long and prosper.